And there's a simple graphic of the arrangement with, on the left-hand side, as you look, what we put in terms of the existing assets, customer base and people, and the Oracle license, and Xansa in terms of their skills, best of business practice, etc., to provide the JV. It's 50-50. The interesting point there at the very bottom is that we think over a period of 10 years, over £224 million will be released to frontline care in the NHS. It offers a full range of services, and I needn't go through those too much, but they're as you get any F&A operation based on Oracle 11i platform. People ask me, why did you stop doing it in-house? What's wrong with you as public servant? You must realise public is best. And there's quite a few answers to that question, and all very, very fundamental, really. It was unrealistic to assume that the NHS would want to embrace this thing, because NIMBYism is a very powerful factor in the NHS, as it is everywhere. Everyone agrees this is a good thing to do, but not in my backyard. These weren't our core skills. We run hospitals. We don't run accounting functions. So we should not have been in this field. We should have giving it to people who do understand these things. There's a very important point about there was no clarity about who was the customer, who was the client, who sets a service regime. If you set the business up in-house, both the user and their provider feel they have the right to define service standards, price and quality. It produces a great lack of clarity about who should do what to where and when and why. Also, it was no longer to impose top-down controls on the NHS. It's never built as an in-house solution. And one of the other concepts was, as you saved money, you'd reinvest it to build the business. Well, it doesn't quite work that way, because there's a 3-year time lag between investment and saving. And also the risks and rewards were not properly aligned. The department was running the business, but the NHS were taking the rewards and the benefits. And we think a JV will work for some, again, fundamental reasons. It will bring in commercial skills that we lack. We have better operational skills now in the centres from people who are best in class. And we can offer more services, skills we don't have, like payroll and procurement. We have better software support from the likes of Oracle, who see this as a very important market to be seen to be supporting. And there's a much better match between risk and reward, and a clear separation between customer and client. But it's still part of the NHS family. We have better access to modern services for the NHS, greater access to capital for expansion, and the NHS can concentrate on its core skills, which are running hospitals, not running shared service centres. The issues with the business as it grows are several, and we're managing those. You'll have to prove its worth on an economic and quality basis to each individual NHS trust. In other words, these things have to be proven transparently to be at the right price and the right quality for customers to take them in the public sector. And if we can't make it that way, then we shouldn't be trying to do shared services in the NHS. And trusts therefore make their own operational choice based on economic grounds whether they would join SBS or not. And there's a good commercial tension there between the relationships between SBS and the public sector. The service will be properly customer focused in terms of goals, and will be contractual based as opposed to a service level agreement, which is again interpretable by both sides. Our immediate strategy will be to try and get volume in London and the South East, where historically the greatest number of staff are temporary employment or high cost of labour. And that will give us the volume we need, critical mass we need to expand elsewhere. We need to bring in more services into the business, and HR is an obvious next step, and that may involve bringing in new partners to do that. And the global economy will prevail in this business. There is a global market in outsourcing and F&A, and it will prevail. And I think this kind of JV, will become more and more common in the government sector, particularly around large, complex businesses the government want to outsource. And I'll explain why I think that is. There is a complete transparency of the life of the business about commercial decisions. And the JV holds both sets of feet to the fire. When I first signed the contract, I thought, great, that's someone else's problem now. But the reality is that as you're running a business, you have to make it grow and you have to make it a profit, and make a profit. And although it's an alien concept to us as public servants, we can grasp these things given time. And by having this dynamic relationship, the business is no longer fixed to a contract. It can think about how it can change service standards, qualities to grow as a business and respond to the client's needs better. So it's a real-time business, okay? Problems have to be solved by the partners and changes can be made to the way we operate very easily. Outsourcing complex contracts on fixed-time contracts locks in issues and locks in behaviour and lacks flexibility. The point I was making earlier was that a typical government outsourcing will define its output specification 2 years before the contract is signed. We then hand those over to lawyers who then argue for many happy years about what that means in contractual terms. What happens then on the public sector side is a contract is signed, it's put in a drawer and never read, and everyone thinks their own interpretation of the contract applies. And the private sector, of course, changed their negotiation team to their delivery team. And so two whole new teams appear on the scene, and the majority of which will not have read the contract, will not understand the contract, and will apply what they put their own subjective judgments to delivery standards as opposed to what is right and proper. A JV allows that relationship to be flexible and change over time. It provides equity upside and downside to both sides. My experience in the public sector of large outsourcing IT contracts is the moment it goes belly up, and we've had several of those in the public sector, there's a requirement to refinance the contract and put it back on an even keel again. If the contract goes very well, we hear no more about it, and profits are earned by the private sector. To me, as a public servant and as a taxpayer, that looks to me like equity downside is given to the public sector and equity upsides taken by the private. Doesn't seem very sensible. It becomes a real business that can respond to customer needs on a flexible basis without resorting to lawyers to change the contract, and it's much more suitable for large dynamic situations. I don't think, however, it's suitable for everything. It's suitable just for very large dynamic problems the government may face. And it adds, in the long term, it adds and brings commercial skills to the public sector, which is one of the greatest beefs the private sector have, is about our lack of understanding of the private sector. So how are things going in the business? Well, I got these figures from the business, so if there's any complaints about them from my colleagues in Xansa, then I need to go back to talk to their FD. But essentially, based on year ending 30th April, in other words, all these data applies for 6, 7, and very close to the end of the year, and we are pretty certain there's going to be the outturn. Turnover in 05-06 was £21 million, forecast this year 27, next year 40 million. Employees in the UK, and this is two interesting data you need to look together, UK and India. In the UK, we started with 677, currently at 772, but it will go down to 700 next year. And in India, we started with 150, and we're up to 700 by this time next year. So there's a shift of work being done now much more between UK and India, and I recently gave agreement to SBS to outsource up to 60% of the work to India rather than to UK. And a number of client trusts, we started with 100 in 05-06, where we have 206 by the end of 07-08, and we are pretty certain it's going to become profitable in 07-08, allowing both sides to pay dividends back to their shareholders, and in our case the shareholders are the taxpayer. We note that the average trust who goes across and in users shared services, savings around 34% are achievable, and transition costs can vary considerably from trust to trust. Taking people out of the public sector can be very expensive, but we find even the most expensive trust is able to repay its investment in under 3 years. And the last slide really is a very important day for us in the public sector, was the grand opening of SBS as a business in April 2000 or whatever it was, and opened by Sir Nigel Crisp and Alistair Cox from Xansa. Alistair Crisp is the ex-chief executive of the NHS, and you can see Nigel there is pledging the NHS to support the JV and its goals. And over the next few years, we must see the public sector moving from an income-based model to one that understands its cost drivers, and managing those costs. Okay, thank you very much.